Chapter 2412, ZU Again. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Godbrandy. Translation checker, Pew Pew Lasergun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. But after giving it more thought, he concluded that it should be unlikely. Ice Heart Valley was a big sect with tens of thousands of disciples, so it was impossible to secretly bring men here without anyone noticing. Moreover, marriage wasn't forbidden in Ice Heart Valley. If any disciple found a man they liked, they could get married. It was just that after getting married, they would no longer be considered part of the sect. Bing Yun's rules weren't too strict when it came to love, as she knew that everyone had desires and emotions, and it was pretty normal that the sect's disciples would eventually meet a man they liked while wandering outside. The rules were pretty progressive in this sense. But bumping into men here was surprising nonetheless. Since they could stay here, their background must be far from ordinary. Yang Kai became curious and wanted to hear what they were talking about, but as he lightly probed the auras of these two, Yang Kai became alert and no longer dared to act rashly. One of these men turned out to be a second-order Emperor Realm Master. Yang Kai had fought First Order Emperors in the past, and even killed a few of them, but he had yet to fight someone in the Second Order, so he was unsure as to how strong they were. Moreover, he had come here with a mission, and he couldn't afford to get sidetracked. Yang Kai hesitated only for a short moment before fleeing towards a distant place. Who goes there? Suddenly, someone shouted from the building and a human figure quickly dashed out. Yang Kai was surprised. It seemed he'd underestimated the perception of this second-order Emperor Realm Master. He couldn't even get past the building without getting noticed. Not hesitating, Yang Kai teleported away, disappearing from where he was standing. In the next moment, a male figure appeared where Yang Kai had been hiding until a moment ago. The figure's expression was gloomy as he released his divine sense, checking all around. However, he didn't sense anyone's presence. A young man immediately caught up to him, stopping beside the middle-aged man and asking with a frown, "Martial Uncle Yao, what happened?" The middle-aged man replied, "There was someone here just a moment ago." The young man was surprised, "Who?" The man shook his head, "I'm not sure. However, that person left very quickly. I can even sense fluctuations of space principles here." Space principles? The young man was shocked and blurted out, "Martial Uncle, are you saying that there's someone in Ice Heart Valley that is proficient in the Tao of space?" The middle-aged man contemplated for a while before slowly shaking his head. "As far as I know, there is no one in Ice Heart Valley who is proficient in the Tao of space. The reason behind these remnant space principles could be due to some kind of space array that had been set up here ahead of time." Hearing his words, the young man relaxed and smiled. "For a moment, I was worried that there might be some genius in Ice Heart Valley who was able to cultivate the Tao of space, but it turns out that it was just some kind of temporary space array. I wonder who was so bored to create and use such a thing." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "Xie, you should know that there are many people in Ice Heart Valley who are against this marriage, right? For example, that current Valley Master. Perhaps this was her doing." The young man faintly smiled. "Even if it was her, what can she do? The wedding is in just 2 days. At that time, I'll bring ZU back to our sect and she will no longer have any relations with Ice Heart Valley." The middle-aged man nodded. "ZU is the best among Ice Heart Valley's younger generation. Actually, even in the whole Northern Territory, there is hardly anyone who can compare to her. Regardless of whether we're talking about cultivation or aptitude, she is not inferior to you. You two are a good match." Hearing ZU's name, an obsessed expression appeared on the young man's face and he said gently, "That is natural. Otherwise, how could Xie take a fancy to her?" The middle-aged man frowned and looked at him. "Our Seeking Passion sect Seeking Passion Supreme Art pursues the Tao of passion in our cultivation. The higher the passion, the quicker the cultivation speed. However, Xie, you have to remember that if the other party does not return your affections, you'll receive a huge backlash the day your secret art reaches the grand accomplishment stage. Are you sure you can capture that ZU's heart and make her your own? Back in the day, your father almost died because of this. Luckily, at the critical moment, your mother was moved by him. Martial Uncle hopes that nothing of the sort will happen to you. After all, the future of our Seeking Passion sect rests on your shoulders." The young man said confidently, "Martial Uncle, don't worry, as long as ZU returns to the sect with us, I'm sure I can conquer her body and mind. Xie has learned well from father how to tame a woman. It's good that you're this confident. In any case, let's rest now, there are still 2 days left until the wedding. At that time, even the sect master will come here. You must be prepared." Hearing his words, the young man was astonished. Lord Father will come here personally. Isn't that giving too much face to Ice Heart Valley? The middle-aged man smiled. Although Ice Heart Valley is somewhat unworthy of its status nowadays, it is still known as one of the top sects in the Northern Territory. When their ancestral founder was still here, they were on par with our Seeking Passion sect, so it's fine to give them some face. Moreover, this is your wedding we're talking about. How can the sect master, your father, not come personally? That's great, the young man said happily. Yang Kai was shuttling back and forth through Ice Heart Valley's barriers and spirit arrays. With Bing Yun's token in hand, he didn't have to worry about carelessly touching something and getting trapped. He kept moving deeper and deeper into the sect while avoiding all sorts of dangers. After 1 hour, he arrived at an extremely cold place. In fact, cold pervaded the whole of Ice Heart Valley, and since its disciples cultivated ice attributes, secret arts and secret techniques, they could obtain twice the result with half the effort while cultivating here. However, this area was far colder than the rest, and even Yang Kai had to circulate his source chi to resist the chill here. Unlike the situation outside, Yang Kai could no longer sense anyone's aura after entering this place. This should be Ice Heart Valley's restricted area. Each sect had restricted areas, most of which contained the memorial tablets of the sect's ancestors or special cultivation paradises. Usually, only a small number of people were allowed to set foot in such places. As for Ice Heart Valley's restricted area, it was used as a cultivation area for the most outstanding disciples, as well as a confinement area. If a disciple committed a mistake, they could be locked up here. Even Ice Heart Valley's disciples couldn't bear the cold here for too long. Ahead was a corridor covered in a layer of ice. Yang Kai held up Bing Yun's token and broke through the barriers here, heading deeper and deeper into the restricted area where the ice principles became stronger with each step he took. Yang Kai was amazed, aware that this place was of the utmost importance to Ice Heart Valley. If the disciples cultivated here, their cultivation speed would be astonishing. Of course, they'd first have to bear the pressure of the ice principles, otherwise, they would simply freeze to death. On both sides of the ice corridor were pure white, mirror-like walls. On these walls were engraved a lot of lifelike figures. When Yang Kai gazed at him, he felt as if they were coming to life in front of him. Each figure was exquisite and graceful, seemingly demonstrating some powerful secret technique. He couldn't help but stare at them as he became somewhat entranced. However, what he cultivated wasn't an ice attribute secret art, so even if there was this opportunity in front of him, there was nothing he could do. He couldn't infer any profound mysteries from these moving pictures, only feeling that they were rather peculiar. Sighing faintly, Yang Kai was aware that this opportunity had no fate with him, so he no longer hesitated and dashed toward the corridor's end. After a little while, he reached the end, and what appeared in front of him was an open space, as well as an ice lake that released a mind-numbing cold. The ground there was frozen solid, with the ice principles all around ready to freeze one's very soul. Yang Kai shuddered as he pushed his source chi harder to ward off the cold. Due to the frigid temperatures here, the whole area was filled with white mist, making it impossible to see too far ahead of oneself. Yang Kai took a look around and saw a small island in the middle of the ice lake where a blurry figure sat cross-legged. Is that the Ice Heart Valley disciple who summoned Bing Yun? This thought flashed in his mind as he quietly released his divine sense to investigate. The other party's cultivation was the same as his, third-order Dao Source realm. What made Yang Kai feel strange though was that this person's aura was familiar, as if he had met her somewhere before. While Yang Kai was lost in thought, a buzzing sound was transmitted from the island. His mind shook as he felt as if something on the small island was summoning him. The discovery left Yang Kai thoroughly puzzled as he wondered what exactly could be calling him. Honored Master, a pleasing voice suddenly sounded from the small island and called out to Yang Kai, Honored Master, is that you? Have you come to see Yue? From the looks of it, she'd mistaken Yang Kai for someone else. After hearing her voice, Yang Kai became clear as to why he found her aura familiar earlier. After all, he had met this young woman only a few days ago. Although they only had a brief contact, Yang Kai still remembered her aura and voice. He coughed lightly and tried to sound as gentle as possible so as to avoid scaring the other party, Sister Ziyu. On the small island, the girl seemed frightened as she shouted, Who are you? What are you doing here? This was Ice Heart Valley's restricted area. Without the permission of the sect's higher-ups, even someone like her couldn't come here, so how could she not be surprised when a man suddenly appeared in this place? After seemingly thinking of something, Ziyu coldly snorted, Are you from Seeking Passion sect? Is that you, Feng Shi? Her words were full of hostility. It was unknown how this Feng Shi had offended her. Yang Kai stood in place and said, Sister Ziyu, you misunderstand. I'm not Feng Shi, and I'm not from Seeking Passion sect. I'm here because of Sister Ziyu's distress signal. Distress signal. Ziyu was dumbfounded. She then said in a delicate voice, how do you know about it? The one I summoned was my sect's ancestral founder.